Hello, my name is Emma Donohue, and I am a member of the Disabled American Veterans Auxiliary, or the DAVA, and I am going to explain in detail Robert's Rules of Orders and how that would work. I am going to be using a resource from the San Diego State University. So some of the terms on there may say student organizations, but it is applicable to any and all organizations, and it is a standard practice that should be used in all business meetings. So let's get started. So the Robert's Rule of Order. First things first is we should talk about the history of Robert's Rule. So the first edition of Robert's Rule of Order was published in February of 1876 by U.S. Army Major Henry Martin Robert. Its procedures were loosely modeled after those used in the United States House of Representatives. Robert wrote Robert's Rule of Orders after presiding over a church meeting and discovering that delegates from different areas of the country did not agree about proper procedure. The book is now in its 10th edition and is titled Robert's Rule of Order Newly Revised, or RONR. So, the Robert's Rule of Order provides applicable rules governing key matters of meeting and general procedures, including establishing a constitution and bylaws for the organization, structure of the meeting, agenda, and debate, motions, including making, seconding, debating, modifying, and defending and amending motions, sufficient majority and simple majority, which decisions are appropriate to them, establishment of a quorum, definition of membership, voting rights of presiding officers, and voting procedures. So going into the outline of basic parliament procedure. So the parliamentary authority is from Robert's Rule of Order, the newly revised 10th edition. So the rules of governing an organization, state and federal law says that it's governing corporations, tax-exempt organizations, public legislative bodies, etc. The Articles of Incorporation are applicable to corporations. Governing documents of parent organizations are applicable to chapters, affiliates, etc. of larger organizations. Local constitution and bylaws are what defines the organization's basic structure and fundamental rules. It normally requires a 2/3 vote and prior notice for amendment and are not subject to suspension. The standing rules are operating procedures consistent with all of the above, normally can be amended by a majority vote at any business meeting and can be suspended. Rules of order are parliamentary authority superseded by any of the above that conflict. Precedent and custom apply that when there are no written rules of governing a situation. So the purposes of the parliamentary procedure are to ensure majority rule, protect the rights of the minority, the absentees, and individual members, provide order, fairness, and decorum, and facilitate the transaction of business and expedite meetings. The basic principles of parliamentary procedure are that all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. A quorum must be present for the group to act. If the bylaws of the organization do not establish a quorum, the general rule is that a majority of the entire membership must be present in order to transact business. This is very important because it then leads into the numbers that are able to be voting on and to make sure that it is a productive meeting. There needs to be full and free discussion of every motion, and that is a basic right. And if the basic right is not being held, that is limiting on freedom of speech and puts you in a position of having members in distress. Only one question at a time may be considered, and only one person may have the floor at any one time. So no talking over each other. That's just common courtesy. Members have a right to know what the immediately pending question is and to have it restated before a vote is taken. No person can speak until recognized by the chairperson. Personal remarks are always out of order. This is not the time for personal opinions. It's the time for debating a fact. A majority decides a question except when basic rights of members are involved. A 2/3 vote is required for any motion that deprives a member of rights in any way, e.g., cutting off a debate. Silence gives consent. Those who do not allow that decision to be made, those who do not vote allow the decision to be made by those who do vote. And the chairperson should always remain impartial. So the typical order of business, this should be done at every meeting. This is the format for how every meeting should go, and there's no real deviation from it. It should always start with a call to order, then going into opening exercises if that is applicable, a roll to call / determination of a quorum, so figuring out how many members are there and if you meet quorum, and to establish potential voting numbers, adoption of the agenda, reading and approval of the minutes from previous meetings, reports of officers, reports of standing committees, reports of special committees, special orders, unfinished business and general orders, new business, program if applicable, announcements, the good of the order, and then finally the adjournment. The role of the presiding officer is to remain impartial during debate. The presiding officer must relinquish the chair in order to debate the merits of a motion. They are only to vote to create or break a tie or 2/3 matter or 2/3 for matters requiring a 2/3 vote. The exception would be the presiding officer may vote on any vote by ballot. So if it's a secret vote, then they are allowed to vote because they are not making their opinions known. The officer is to determine that a quorum is present before transacting business, introduce business in a proper order, recognize speakers, determine if a motion is in order, keep discussion germane to the pending motion, maintain order, and put motions to a vote and announce results. And lastly, they are to employ unanimous consent or general consent when appropriate. So the general procedure for handling a motion is that a member normally must obtain the floor by being recognized by the chair. The member then makes the motion. A motion must normally be seconded by another member before it can be considered. So if you were making a motion about the calendar for the upcoming year, I would say I would raise my hand, wait to be acknowledged by the chair, and then I would make my motion, say I move to approve the calendar for the next fiscal year, and then I would need somebody else to say I second the motion for the calendar approval. Before the motion is restated by the chair, any member can rise without waiting to be recognized and suggest a modification to the wording to clarify the motion. So if I wasn't clear about how I wanted the calendar approved, that would be saying approving the business meetings, approving volunteer hours, approving events that are happening. What are we approving? The maker of the motion can choose to accept or reject the modified wording, and that does not require a second. So if I say, no, we're just doing the whole calendar, then that leaves it at that. If the motion is in order, the chair will restate the motion and open it to debate if the motion is debatable. So obviously a calendar can go both ways as to if it's a debatable thing. If there's something that is not liked on the calendar, then that is something up for debate. If it is just setting in time the meeting times, then that is not a debatable topic. The maker of the motion has the right to speak first in any debate. So if it was a debatable calendar, I would be able to say, I chose these organizations and these states for us to do because blah, blah, blah. And that would give a little bit more context before the debate was to start. The debate is closed when discussion has ended or 2/3 vote closes the debate. It's from the previous question. The chair restates the motion and, if necessary, clarifies the consequences of affirmative and negative votes. The chair calls for a vote. The chair announces the result. And any member may challenge that chair's count by demanding a division of the assembly. So Now that we have talked about the debate a little bit, let's get into the general rules of the debate, because it's not just a free-for-all. There are rules that have to be followed for it. So no member may speak until recognized by the chair. All discussion must be relevant to the immediately pending question. No member may speak a second time until every member who wishes to speak has had the opportunity to do so. No member can speak more than twice to each motion. No member can speak more than 10 minutes. All remarks must be addressed to the chair. No cross debate is permitted. It is not permissible to speak against one's own motion, but one can vote against one's own motion. Debate must address issues, not personalities. No one is permitted to make personal attacks or question the motives of the other speakers. The presiding officer must relinquish the chair in order to participate in the debate and cannot reassume the chair until the pending main question is disposed of. When possible, the chair should let the floor alternate between those speaking in support and those speaking in opposition to the motion. When a large number of people wish to speak to a motion, it may be advisable for the chair to make a speakers list. Members may not disrupt the assembly, and rules of debate can be changed by a 2/3 vote. So if the group as a whole and our chapter as a whole realizes that some of these just don't work for us, that has to be completely voted on with a 2/3 vote for that to be approved. So let's talk about the motions in ascending order of procession. So first off, only one main motion may be on the floor at a time, but more than one secondary motion may be on the floor. When any of the motions on the following list is the immediately pending motion, i.e. the last motion made, any motion listed below it on the list can be made at that time, and any motion above it on the list cannot be made at that time. Pending motions must be disposed of in descending order of precedence. So the first motion is the main motion. It introduces business to the assembly for its consideration. A main motion can only be made when no other motion is pending. A main motion yields to privileged, subsidiary, and incidental motions. So subsidiary motions change or affect how the main motion is handled and voted on before the main motion. The postpone indefinitely is made when the assembly does not want to take a position on the main question. Its adoption kills the main motion for the duration of the session and avoids a direct vote on the question. It is useful in disposing of a poor motion that cannot be either adopted or expressly rejected without possibly undesirable consequences. Unlike other subsidiary motions, debate on the motion to postpone indefinitely can go into the merits of the main motion. An amendment changes the wording of the main motion before it's voted upon. An amendment must be germane to the main motion. Its acceptance does not adopt the motion thereby amended. That motion remains pending and is in modified form. Rejection of an amendment leaves the pending motion worded as it is before the amendment was offered. Amendment can delete words, phrases, sentences, or paragraphs, strike out words, phrases, or sentences, and insert new ones, add words, phrases, sentences, or paragraphs, or substitute entire paragraphs or the text of the motion and insert another. When an entire motion is substituted for another, the chair must first call for a vote on the motion to substitute to determine the advisability of substituting a new motion. If the motion to substitute passes, the chair then throws the substitute motion open to debate. The substitute motion, in turn, must be voted upon and is subject to amendment. Note that there is no provision in Robert's rule for a friendly amendment. The only way a motion can be modified without a vote after it has been stated by the chair is with the unanimous consent of the members present. And then we go into the secondary amendment, which is an amendment that can be offered to an amendment of the second order. Amendments of the third order are not permitted. And then we have refer or commit, which sends a pending motion to a standing committee or to an ad hoc special committee to be appointed or elected for consideration. The motion The motion to refer may include instructions to investigate, recommend, or take action, and may specify the composition of the committee. The postpone indefinitely or postpone to a certain time delays action until a certain time specified in a motion, but not beyond the next regular business meeting. Limit or extend debate is used, 1, to reduce or increase the number of length of speeches permitted, or 2, to require the debate to be closed at a specific time. It requires a 2/3 vote. The previous question or called question immediately closes the debate if passed. It requires a second and 2/3 vote. The lay on the table enables the assembly to lay on the pending question aside temporarily when something else of immediate urgency has arisen. It is not debatable. A motion to lay on the table is out of order if the evident intent is to avoid further consideration of the motion. Frequently, when one indicates the desire to table a motion, the correct motion is either to postpone indefinitely or postpone definitely. Now we go into privilege motions, which do not relate to the pending business, but have to deal with urgent matters, which without debate must be considered immediately. So the call for the orders of the day requires the assembly to conform to the agenda or to take up a general or special order that is due to come up at the time certain, unless 2/3 of those voting do not wish otherwise. A member can interrupt a speaker to call out for the orders of the day. There is a raise a question privilege, which permits a request or main motion relating to the rights and privileges of the assembly or any of its members. Examples include requests relating to members' ability to hear a speaker, or requests to go into executive session, which is a closed session. A member may interrupt a speaker to raise a question of privilege. Then there is a recess, which is used to request an intermission, which does not close the meeting. Then there's the adjourn, used to close the meeting immediately and is not debatable. And then lastly, the fix the time to which to adjourn. Sets the time and sometimes place for another meeting or an adjourned meeting before the regular business meeting to continue business of the session. Now we're going to go into some of the incidental motions, which questions of procedure that arise out of other motions and must be considered before the other motion. So first we have the point of order, which is used when a member believes that the rules of the assembly are being violated, thereby calling on the chair for a ruling and enforcement of the rules. A member can interrupt a speaker to raise a point of order. We have an appeal, which is used to challenge the chair's ruling on a question of parliamentary procedure. A member can interrupt a speaker to appeal from the decision of the chair. There's suspended rules, which is used to make parliamentary rule or special rule of an organization temporarily inoperative. The motion cannot be applied to the Constitution and bylaws unless those documents include specific provisions for suspension. Normally requires a 2/3 vote. And then we go into the withdraw, which permits the maker of a motion to remove it from deliberation after the motion has been stated by the chair. If there is not unanimous consent, the motion is debated and voted upon. Then there is the point of information, which requests the chair or through the chair to another officer or member to provide information relevant to the business at hand. A point of information must be in the form of a question. A request for information regarding the parliamentary procedure or the organization's rules bearing on the business at hand is referred to as a parliamentary inquiry. Now we go into the consideration of a question, which suppresses business that is irrelevant or inappropriate and undesirable to be discussed. The objection must be made immediately, acceptable to interrupt a speaker. Does not require a second, is not debatable, and requires 2/3 vote opposed to consideration in order to pass. Then there is the division of a question. This divides a motion into containing 2 or more provisions that can stand alone so that each provision can be considered and voted upon separately. This is not debatable. Division of the assembly used to demand the rising vote to verify the vote count. The motion can be made without obtaining the floor and does not require a second, is not debatable, and does not require a vote. We're getting towards the end. Now there is the main motions that bring a question back before the assembly. So there is the take from the table, which resumes consideration of a motion laid on the table earlier in the same session or in the previous session. It is not debatable. There is a reconsider, which reopens the motion to debate that has already been voted upon in the same session. The motion to reconsider can only be made by a member who voted in the prevailing side. It suspends action on the motion to which is applied unless it has been decided it cannot be postponed beyond the next regular business session. There's a rescind, annual, or repeal, or amend something previously adopted, which repeals or amends a motion for which it was too late to reconsider, normally requires 2/3 vote on the present or majority vote of the entire membership. However, if previous notice has been given, then only a majority of vote is needed for those present is required. A motion to rescind cannot be applied to action that cannot be reversed. Lastly, we're going into voting. So there's the majority vote, which is defined as more than half of the votes cast by those present and voting, i.e. excluding absentations, unless the organization's rules specify otherwise. So majority of those present or majority of the entire membership. There is a 2/3 vote, defined as at least 2/3 of those present voting unless otherwise specified by the organization's rules. Examples of motions that require a 2/3 vote are to close, to limit or extend a debate, to suspend the rules, to amend the Constitution and bylaws, to close nominations, to remove an officer or expel a member, or to object to the consideration of a motion. And there is voting by the chair. Except when there is a ballot vote, the chair only votes when his or her vote would affect the result. Now is the methods of voting. So there's a voice vote, which is the method normally used. That's the ayes and nays. There's a show of hands or rising vote, which is used to verify an inconclusive vote or vote on motions requiring a 2/3 vote. And then there is a ballot, which is normally used for election of officers and when ordered by a majority vote. Lastly, there is a roll call vote, which is used when it's desired to have a record of how each member voted. It can be ordered by a majority vote unless the organization's bylaws specify otherwise. Lastly, there is the proxy vote, which is prohibited unless specifically provided by the charter or bylaws. So some recommended books and websites and resources, if you would like to learn more about Robert's Rules of Orders, are the Robert's Rules of Order Newly Revised 10th edition from 2000. There's the Robert's Rule of Order Newly Revised in Brief from 2004. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Robert's Rule by Nancy Sylvester, published in 2004. Robert's Rules for Dummies, which is a C. Allen Jennings book from 2004. And the websites are robertsrule.com, parliamentarians.org, rulesonline.com, and parlypro.org. I hope this helped, and thanks for learning about Robert's Rules.